His knuckles were bone white where he gripped the knife, its polished surface catching the sickly yellow glint of the single grime-streaked bulb above us. I knew with a terrifying certainty that chilled me to the marrow that this was it. My life, my silly ordinary little life, was about to end right here, in this filthy forgotten alley reeking of stale garbage and despair. But he hadn't counted on one thing. None of them had. They hadn't counted on the old man. The quiet one from down the street, the one everyone, including me, probably dismissed as just another retired gentleman content with his porch chair and his newspaper. They hadn't counted on the fact that the man secretly watching, the man whose footsteps were now impossibly silent on the cracked pavement behind them, was an ex-Marine. And his eyes, when they finally fell upon these thugs, held a promise of retribution far colder and harder than the cheap steel in the thug's trembling hand. The air itself seemed to crackle with the shift, the sudden lethal focus of a predator who had been observing his prey, and had finally decided to strike. My name is Sarah, and I'm a young woman who, until recently, believed the biggest drama in my life would be meeting a tight deadline at my graphic design job or accidentally shrinking my favorite sweater. My world was painted in soft, predictable colors. I'd found a small studio apartment in what I thought was a quiet, almost charmingly old-fashioned part of the city. It had creaky wooden floors and a window that looked out onto a surprisingly leafy street, a welcome change from the stark concrete and glass I was used to. I loved the sense of history in the old brick buildings, the established trees that formed a canopy in summer. It felt like a little haven, a place where I could finally breathe after the hustle of the downtown office. My days had a rhythm, a comforting predictability. I'd wake early, make my coffee just so, and enjoy the quiet morning light before heading out for my walk to the bus stop. Evenings were my favorite. I'd take the longer route home, relishing the transition from the city's frantic pulse to the calmer beat of my neighborhood. Often I'd stop at the local library, its hushed aisles and the scent of old paper a balm to my soul. Then it was home to my cozy little space, perhaps a simple dinner, a book, the distant, muted sounds of city life lulling me towards sleep. It was, I thought, a good life. A stable life. A safe life. Part of that familiar landscape was Mr. Henderson. He lived a few doors down from my building, an older man, always neatly dressed, his silver hair combed precisely. He was a fixture on his small, tidy porch, usually seated in a simple wooden chair. Sometimes a newspaper lay open on his lap. Other times he'd just sit, his gaze fixed on the street, on the people passing by. He wasn't intrusive, never nosy. His observation felt different. More like he was cataloging, absorbing. Our interactions were brief, limited to a polite nod, a soft good morning or good evening. I assumed he was retired, perhaps a widower, content with his quiet routine. I'd occasionally catch his eye as I walked past, and there was a stillness about him, an almost unnerving calmness. I never gave it much thought beyond that. He was just Mr. Henderson, the quiet neighbor. The stability he represented, the peace I cherished, all of it was about to be shattered. The first sour note in my neighborhood's symphony was almost imperceptible. A new group started congregating near the corner store, a place I passed daily. 3, sometimes 4 guys, always loud, their laughter grating, edged with a kind of derision that set my teeth on edge. They weren't locals. Their faces were unfamiliar, and they carried themselves with an air of misplaced ownership, as if the street corner was their personal stage. Their eyes were the worst. They'd follow me as I walked past, a greasy, unwelcome touch that made my skin crawl. Initially I chided myself. You're being silly, Sarah, I'd think. This is a city. Not every person you encounter will be a ray of sunshine. I'd avert my gaze, quicken my pace a fraction, and try to dismiss them. But the comments started soon after. Low, suggestive whispers meant to be overheard, designed to unnerve. Things like, "Hey there, sweet thing," or "Were you off to in such a hurry, gorgeous?" Each syllable felt like a tiny, sharp pebble aimed at my composure. My stomach would clench. I'd clutch my bag strap tighter, my knuckles showing white. My heart would pick up its pace, a nervous little bird fluttering in my chest. I remember mentioning it to my friend Chloe during one of our coffee meetups. She was pragmatic, perhaps a little too dismissive. She told me guys like that are just idiots, best ignored, that they'd eventually get bored and find someone else to bother. Ignore them, she'd said. But ignoring them felt like letting a weed take root. The unease they sparked wasn't diminishing. It was growing, coiling in my gut like a cold snake. There was something in their persistence, in the way their smirk seemed to hold a latent threat that went beyond casual street harassment. It felt more deliberate, more focused. But what could I do? Who would take me seriously? Even Mr. Henderson on his porch would sometimes be there as I hurried past, his expression unreadable. Did he see them? Did he notice my discomfort? His gaze would meet mine for a moment, steady, unwavering, before I'd look away, feeling a strange mix of embarrassment and a desperate, unspoken plea for something. For the normalcy to return. That seed of unease was beginning to sprout, its tendrils reaching into every corner of my previously secure world. Their audacity grew with each passing week. Ignoring them, it turned out, was not a deterrent. It was an invitation. They seemed to relish the small flinches I couldn't always hide, the way I try to make myself smaller, less noticeable. One particularly humid evening, the air thick and promising a thunderstorm that never quite broke, they escalated. As I neared the corner store, my stomach already tight with apprehension, they didn't just loiter. They spread out, a deliberate, casual blockade across the sidewalk. My breath caught. I tried to appear unfazed, aiming to detour around them by stepping into the gutter. But the one I'd privately nicknamed Gravel Voice, taller than the others, with a permanently sour expression and eyes that seemed to absorb all light, moved to intercept me. He asked me why the hurry if I had a hot date, his tone a sneering imitation of politeness. The others behind him snickered, a chorus of crude amusement. My face burned. I mumbled something about being late, trying to edge past him. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he'd physically stop me, grab my arm. Then, with an infuriating slowness, he shifted just enough to let me pass. Their jeering laughter followed me like a physical blow all the way down the block. My hands trembled so violently I fumbled with my keys for what felt like an eternity before I could get my apartment door open. Once inside, I sagged against it, gulping air, my heart hammering like it wanted to escape my chest. The comforting familiarity of my street now felt tainted, imbued with a lurking menace. I started varying my routes home, adding precious minutes to my commute, seeking out busier, better-lit streets, desperately trying to avoid them. But it was as if they had an uncanny ability to anticipate my movements. A few days into my new, supposedly safer detours, I rounded a corner onto a bustling main road, and there they were, lounging against a shop front, their eyes locking onto me instantly. A cold wave of dread washed over me. How did they always know? It was during this period of escalating anxiety that I noticed Mr. Henderson more. Or perhaps I noticed him noticing me. Sometimes as I'd scurry past, head down, he'd be on his porch and his gaze wouldn't be on his newspaper. It would be on me, and then for a fleeting second, it would shift down the street in the direction from which I'd just come, the direction where the thugs often lurked. There was no judgment in his look, no overt concern, just a quiet, assessing stillness. I once saw him watching Gravel Voice and his crew from a distance as they hassled a delivery driver. Mr. Henderson didn't intervene, just watched, his expression unreadable. It made me wonder fleetingly what he was thinking. Did he disapprove? Was he indifferent? Or was he something else entirely? The unanswered questions added another layer to my growing disquiet. The city's embrace, once comforting, now felt like it was slowly, almost imperceptibly, tightening around me. The tension reached a breaking point. It wasn't just the comments or the leering anymore. They became bolder, more aggressive in their harassment. One afternoon, as I was walking home trying to appear confident, Gravel Voice deliberately bumped into me, hard enough to send my shoulder bag flying, its contents spilling onto the grimy sidewalk. My carefully organized life literally scattered at my feet. They all laughed, a harsh, barking sound as I scrambled to pick up my pens, my notebook, my dignity. He offered a mock apology, his eyes glittering with malice. Another time I found a crude, disgusting drawing tucked under my apartment building's main door buzzer. Not my specific apartment, thank God, but close enough to feel like a violation, a clear message that they knew my general vicinity. My fear was no longer a background hum. It was a constant, screaming siren in my head. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own neighborhood. Sleep became elusive, my nights filled with shadows and half-heard noises. I'd jump at every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren. I seriously considered moving, but the logistics, the cost, the sheer unfairness of being driven from my home by these vermin, it made me feel both furious and helpless. I stopped going to the library in the evenings. My leisurely walks home became frantic dashes. I even started taking taxis more often than I could afford, the expensive bitter pill to swallow. I felt increasingly isolated. Chloe tried to be supportive, suggesting I report them to the police. But what could I say? That some guys were being creepy? That they'd bumped into me? It felt flimsy, insufficient. I imagined the dismissive looks, the polite brush-off. The system, I felt, wasn't designed to protect against this kind of creeping, insidious intimidation. The city, once my oyster, now felt like a tightening trap. The night it all culminated, a heavy sense of foreboding had clung to me like a shroud all day. It was a Friday. I'd pushed myself to work late, hoping the extra hours at the office would mean fewer hours of darkness to navigate on my way home. A foolish hope. By the time I finally left, the city was cloaked in a deep, starless black. The streets, usually buzzing on a Friday, were eerily quiet, an unnatural stillness that amplified the nervous thrumming in my veins. I hesitated, my hand hovering over my phone, debating the cost of a cab versus the potential cost of walking. Stubbornness and a dwindling bank balance won out. I told myself I wouldn't let them win. I wouldn't let them shrink my world to the confines of a taxi. I chose my most direct route, the one past the corner store, a small act of defiance that felt more like foolhardiness as soon as I stepped onto the street. Maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't be there. But the universe rarely obliges such desperate hopes. They weren't at the store. They were further down, strategically positioned near the mouth of a narrow, unlit service alley that cut between two dilapidated warehouses. An alley I instinctively avoided, its shadows always deep and unwelcoming. This time they didn't just call out. They moved. With a terrifying, coordinated swiftness. Before my mind could even process the immediate visceral threat, before my feet could obey the frantic urge to turn and flee, two of them were on me. One grabbed my left arm, his fingers digging in like talons. The other seized my right. I was anchored, trapped between them. Then Gravel Voice, their clear leader, materialized from the deeper shadows of the alley, blocking any hope of escape. His lips curled into a predatory sneer. He said, well, look what we have here. He accused me of thinking I could ignore them, of thinking I was too good for them. His voice was a low snarl, promising violence. A hard shove from behind sent me stumbling, my feet catching on the uneven ground, propelling me deeper into the alley's oppressive throat. He snarled that we were going to have a little chat somewhere more private. The alley was exactly as I'd always feared. A claustrophobic dead end, sealed by a high graffiti-scarred brick wall. Litter crunched underfoot with every terrified shift of my weight. The only illumination came from that single sputtering streetlight at the alley's entrance, casting long dancing shadows that transformed familiar shapes into monstrous caricatures. My bag containing my wallet, my phone, my lifeline, was slung across my body. One of them, the one with the vacant eyes, ripped it from me, the strap snapping with a sickening sound. He appended it, my few possessions cascading onto the filth-strewn ground. My lipstick, a bright slash of defiant red, rolled into a dark, damp corner. My library book, a collection of poetry, landed with a soft, mournful thud. He leered, pawing through my scattered belongings, asking what else I had for them. Gravel Voice stepped closer, his foul breath washing over me, making me gag. His proximity was an assault in itself. I squeezed my eyes shut, a silent scream trapped in my tightening throat, every muscle tensed for an impact I couldn't avoid. A single hot tear escaped, tracing a path down my cold cheek. This was it. This was the culmination of all those weeks of fear. And then, just as the first wave of utter despair threatened to drown me, a new sound cut through the alley's charged atmosphere. Not loud, not aggressive, but imbued with an undeniable authority that sliced through my terror and their vile anticipation like a honed blade. The voice simply stated that was far enough, gentlemen. All three thugs froze mid-leer mid-action. Their heads snapped towards the alley entrance. I turned slowly, a fragile, almost unbelievable spark of hope igniting in my chest. Silhouetted against the dim streetlights, a figure stood. Mr. Henderson. But this was not the Mr. Henderson I knew or thought I knew. The slightly stooped, quiet observer was gone. In his place stood a man transformed. His posture was ramrod straight, feet planted shoulder-width apart, perfectly balanced. His hands, though hanging loosely at his sides, seemed coiled with potential energy. His silver hair caught the faint light, but it was his eyes that held me. No longer passively observant, they now glinted with a focused, almost chilling intensity. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing the hardened steel beneath the gentle facade. He took a single deliberate step into the alley, and the shadows seemed to recoil from him. He suggested, his voice still even but now underscored by a current of absolute command, that they return my belongings. And then he suggested they leave. Gravel voice let out a short, harsh laugh, but it lacked conviction. He taunted Mr. Henderson, asking if Grandpa wanted to be a hero, calling him an old man, questioning if he could even see who he was messing with. He dropped my ruined bag and took a swaggering step towards Mr. Henderson, a pathetic attempt to reassert his dominance. It was a fatal miscalculation. Mr. Henderson didn't utter another word. He simply moved. It wasn't the clumsy shuffle of an old man. It was the explosive, economical movement of a seasoned fighter. As Gravel voice threw a wild, telegraphed punch, Mr. Henderson shifted, a subtle, almost liquid evasion. His left hand shot out not to block but to guide the incoming arm, redirecting its momentum. His right hand followed in a blur, a precise, devastating strike. There was a sickening crack, a sound that seemed to reverberate off the brick walls, sharp and final. Gravel voice shrieked, a high, thin sound of pure agony, his bravado instantly extinguished. He stumbled back, clutching his wrist, which now dangled at an unnatural angle, his face a mask of shock and excruciating pain. Before the other two could react, before their brains could even catch up to the sudden, brutal shift in the alley's power dynamic, Mr. Henderson was on them. It wasn't a fight, it was a swift, clinical dismantling. He moved with a terrifying grace and efficiency. The thug who had been fumbling with the knife lunged. Mr. Henderson met the lunge with a precise elbow strike to the man's solar plexus. The air whooshed out of him in a desperate gasp and he collapsed, doubled over, the knife skittering uselessly across the grimy pavement. Mr. Henderson didn't even glance at the weapon. His attention was already on the third assailant, who, in a surge of panicked stupidity, tried to charge him from the side. A perfectly timed leg sweep sent the man crashing heavily to the ground, his head connecting with the asphalt with a sickening thud. He lay there, groaning, clutching a twisted knee. The entire confrontation lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Maybe less. Two thugs were incapacitated, one gasping for breath, the other writhing in pain. Gravel voice, their leader, was cradling his shattered wrist, his face ashen, staring at Mr. Henderson with wide, terrified eyes. The cruel, predatory glint was gone, replaced by the primal fear of a much smaller animal that had just poked a bear. Mr. Henderson calmly walked over, picked up my ruined bag and its scattered contents, even my library book. He made a small, futile attempt to brush some of the grime off before handing it to me. His eyes, when they met mine, softened for just a moment, a silent inquiry. I could only manage a shaky nod, my voice lost somewhere between shock and overwhelming relief. He then turned his attention back to the three miserable heaps on the ground. He approached Gravel voice, who flinched violently, expecting another blow. Mr. Henderson knelt, his movements unhurried. He informed them, his voice low, each word resonating with cold, hard menace, that this neighborhood was under his watch. He stated unequivocally that they would not bother me again, nor would they bother anyone else in the vicinity. He warned them that if he so much as saw them on this street, or heard even a whisper of them causing trouble, he would assume they were seeking a more permanent lesson. And he assured them he would give it to them. He asked if they had an understanding. Gravel voice, trembling, could only manage a series of frantic, convulsive nods, his eyes darting between Mr. Henderson's implacable face and his whimpering, injured companions. Mr. Henderson simply said, "Good." Then he told them to get out of his sight and to take their trash with them. They scrambled. It was a pathetic, panicked exodus. Gravel Voice, using his one good hand, hauled the winded thug to his feet. Together they half-dragged, half-supported the one with the injured knee, stumbling and tripping over each other in their desperate haste to escape the alley, to escape Mr. Henderson. They didn't look back. They vanished into the indifferent darkness of the city night, leaving behind only the faint, lingering scent of their fear and my battered belongings. My legs threatened to buckle. I was shaking uncontrollably, not from fear any longer, but from the massive adrenaline crash and the tidal wave of relief. Mr. Henderson gently placed a hand on my arm, steadying me, and guided me out of the oppressive, suffocating confines of the alley. The air on the street, though still carrying the city's usual scents, felt cleaner, breathable. He asked if I was all right, his voice returning to its usual quiet cadence, though the steel-eyed glimpse in his eyes still seemed to linger just beneath the surface. I managed to stammer out a thank you, words feeling utterly inadequate for what he had done. I told him I didn't know what would have happened. He gave a small, almost rueful smile. He said he just happened to be taking a late stroll, a colossal understatement that almost made me want to laugh or cry or both. He then added, almost as an afterthought, that he used to do a bit of active work a long time ago. Some things, he said, you don't forget, especially how to deal with bullies. He helped me gather the last of my things, his movements patient and kind. He didn't elaborate on his past, and I didn't ask. The quiet strength he exuded, the sheer capability I had just witnessed, commanded a profound respect that precluded prying. I later heard whispers in the neighborhood, ex-Marine, Special Forces even, some said. He never confirmed anything, but the pieces fit perfectly. He even walked me all the way to my apartment door, a silent, reassuring presence in the night. The thugs were never seen again. Not a shadow, not a rumor. The corner store reverted to being just a store. My neighborhood slowly began to feel like home again, the shadows receding, the fear gradually loosening its grip on my heart. My walks home, though I was more aware, more cautious, eventually regained their peaceful rhythm. I still see Mr. Henderson on his porch. Our nods are still exchanged, but now there's a depth of understanding between us. A silent acknowledgement of the night. The quiet observer became the formidable protector. Sometimes he offers a rare, genuine smile, and it feels like a benediction. That terrifying night taught me that heroes often walk among us, unseen, uncelebrated, their strength hidden beneath an ordinary exterior. It taught me that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. And it taught me that sometimes karma doesn't wait. It's delivered swiftly and decisively in a dark alley by a good man who decided that enough was quite simply enough. My world had been violently disrupted, but thanks to an unassuming ex-Marine, it had been restored, and I finally, truly felt safe again.